Our story begins at the Demonic Martial Alliance, also known as the Demonic Hall. One of the guards is surprised by the sheer number of people gathered there, and his partner says that anyone with talent can learn the demonic arts, which is why it's so packed. But suddenly, the bearded guy gets a confused look on his face when he notices something odd. He then asks if someone passed on, seeing a young man with a peculiar look about him. His friend laughs at the idea since the tournament of the 10 demons hasn't even started yet. So the old-timer questions what a young undertaker would be doing there. The scene then cuts to the boy, and he had a determined look, thinking that from this moment on his journey would begin. After that, we find out the boy's name is Bu Yun-sel, a name his grandfather gave him. He was found abandoned in the snow and learned the undertaker trade from his grandfather. In a flashback, the boy says the body on the table seems to be that of a sword master, and his grandfather asks why he thinks so. Yun-sol explains that he noticed it because the muscles in the left leg were very well developed. The grandfather is proud and pats the boy's head for his incredible perception. He says the boy was born for this, and Yun-sol felt he could endure anything with his grandfather by his side. But this happiness wouldn't last forever, because one day, everything changed. That night, the main character's grandfather mysteriously got out of bed, because he had noticed something was approaching. The old man sensed someone's presence and was on high alert. Noticing that the person had arrived, the grandfather says that those who come unannounced never have good intentions. With that, he wakes up Yun-sol, asking the boy to get up for a moment, and suggests they play a little game of Undertaker, and he promises to give the boy a sword and a cloak if he can last through the game, which gets our MC all excited. The little one then hides inside a cabinet, and his grandfather asks him to hold out in there until the sun rises. Yun-sol is confused by the request and asks if he's supposed to stay there until morning. Ignoring the question, the old man closes the door, and then grabs his sword, and finally leaves the house preparing for what's to come. The intruder then appears, calling him a rat for having hidden for so long, and that now he has finally found him, and he calls the old man the seven-bladed demon, Ujanyang. The main character's grandfather admits it's been a long time since he's heard that name, and the intruder scoffs at him for having refused the position of Vice Lord of the Demonic Hall, and for choosing to get by with such a simple job. Then he starts to exude a terrifying energy, but Janyang reveals that his job wasn't to get by but to atone. The enemy just gives a wicked smile from under his hood. Then the old man asks to take the fight somewhere else so as not to harm any innocents. Upon hearing this, the intruder just lets out a mocking laugh, but he accepts the request and warns him not to try to run. Janyang gets a serious look because if he runs, his grandson will be hurt. Inside the cabinet where Yun-sol was hidden, waiting for his grandfather, but tired of waiting, he gets out of the cabinet because he can't take the cold anymore and complains that he really wants the cloak and sword his grandfather promised. He finds it strange not seeing his grandfather anywhere, and he wonders where he went and imagines maybe he was called in for a job. Complaining that undertakers are treated poorly, he decides to go out and look for him, but as soon as he leaves the house, he freezes at the scene before him. He notices signs of a struggle everywhere, and seeing the surroundings completely destroyed, he gets worried about his grandfather, and without a second thought, the boy starts running towards the forest. He runs as fast as he can, desperate to find his grandfather. However, he finds something he never wanted to see, a scene that would scar the boy's life forever. His grandfather was on the ground leaning against a tree, completely beaten down. Worried, Yun-sol runs towards his grandfather. Noticing the boy's presence, the old man, with his last bit of strength, asks if it's Yun-sol, and in tears the boy confirms it's him, and his grandfather apologizes for what happened, and then says his goodbyes, saying his time has come, and asks Yun-sol not to follow in his footsteps as an undertaker. Desperate, the boy begs him to stop talking like that, but the old man tells him to listen carefully, and pleads for the boy to never seek revenge for what happened to him. The young man is in shock at the request, and tears won't stop streaming from his eyes. He becomes desperate because he can't accept his grandfather's request. Then our main character shouts that he will never forgive those who did this, and says that if he can't get revenge, he will simply follow his grandfather into the afterlife, because he would rather live in the next world with him than continue in this world alone. The old man is heartbroken seeing his grandson like this, as he wanted to pass on in peace. So Janyang makes one last request for the boy to go far, far away, and says that the time they spent together made him happier than he could have ever imagined. After saying his last words, the old man's hand drops and he's gone forever. The old man's body slumps over, and the boy can't believe what just happened. Yun-sol calls for his grandfather, his eyes filled with tears. But it was too late, the man had already passed on forever. The pain and loss take over the MC's heart, and suddenly, his expression completely changes. The sadness transforms into a deep and terrifying emptiness. Later, he prepares the body for the funeral, and understands that his grandfather's request was to protect him. While touching the old man's face, the boy makes a decision. With a look of hatred, he decides he cannot honor his grandfather's last wish, because the thirst for revenge was stronger than any promise. He analyzes the body and notices that both arms were severed in a single stroke, and that the enemy used a rare sword strike that came from the bottom up. Furthermore, he notices something else in the old man's eyes. The sword strikes were aimed upwards, and they hit the old man's eyes dead on with terrifying precision. The main character analyzes the bizarre sword technique used on his grandfather, and comes to the conclusion that it is a demonic-type sword art. Yun-sol knows that the only art capable of causing these wounds is the celestial yoga art. On top of that, he finds 93 weapon marks on his back, which is an absurd number. The boy deduces that the enemy used a device that fires hundreds of hidden weapons. Continuing his analysis, he notices a strange discoloration under the old man's tongue, and his grandfather's nails also showed the same dark coloration. Yun-sol realizes these are signs of poisoning by an extremely potent toxin. Putting the clues together, he understands that the killer masters the celestial yoga art and also possesses an incense device known as the Absolute Realm. And to top it off, he also uses deadly toxins from the rotten bloodline. The main character knows there aren't many people with all these skills. With a look full of hatred, he promises he will definitely find the culprit. He then finishes preparing his grandfather's body for the funeral, and with a heart full of vengeance, the boy closes his eyes, making a silent vow, and with eyes full of hatred, he swears he will find those responsible for this. A tear then falls onto the tournament registration form, where he writes his name Bu Yun-sol and that of a sect he made up on the spot. Back in the present, the young man is finalizing his registration in front of the guards. One of the men mocks the sect's name and thinks the boy is just a coward. And losing his patience, he tells the kid to just stamp the paper already or get lost. The guard was visibly annoyed with the boy's delay, but with hatred in his eyes, Yun-sol bites his own finger, leaving the guards completely stunned. Our main character thinks that his life fell apart with his grandfather's passing, and so he uses his own blood to stamp the registration, because revenge is his only path forward. The two guards were speechless, as they had never seen anything like it. For the main character, this tournament will be the first step towards his revenge. In this world, the battle between the orthodox and unorthodox forces has raged for years. On one side, we have the orthodox faction led by the Martial Alliance, which seeks justice, and on the other, the unorthodox faction of the demonic heaven, which only cares about power. These two forces maintain a balance for a long time, but the orthodox faction wanted to break that balance and created the 18 joint successors. This event marked the birth of the great righteous masters. Feeling threatened, the demonic heaven also created a plan to strengthen itself. And without delay, they executed the plan of the 10 demonic successors. In this plan, 10 prodigies would be chosen to inherit the arts of the 10 demonic sects, and this innovative proposal would change the world of martial arts forever. This attracted countless young people from the martial world to the demonic heaven. We see that the place was filled with all sorts of martial artists. Our main character notices that many people there had a very strange aura, and among all those competitors, he was wondering something. He wanted to know if there was anyone related to the Hong Su who took his grandfather's life. The name Hong Su echoed in his mind. He thinks that the person who took his grandfather's life is a master of incalculable power, and to get revenge, he also needs to become one, but he has no sect or martial arts. So becoming a demonic successor is the only way to get strong fast. But suddenly, all the participants are surprised by something. A huge muscular man appears, walking with several guards. He shouts, introducing himself as head instructor Hyokreon Young of the Golden Arms and Bloodshot Eyes. The other competitors are shocked, as they recognize the famous Golden Arms and Bloodshot Eyes. The instructor explains that the purpose of this place is to select the greatest prodigies of the demonic path, and that only those who pass through all the gates will become candidates for succession. The head instructor then announces what the first gate will be. He says that the masters of the demonic heaven will examine the bones and muscles of each person. The participants find the idea absurd and question if this can even be called a gate. One of the competitors is grabbed by a guard, and the guard says he passed and tells him to come along. Yunchel is pensive about the bone and muscle test and wonders if he'll go to the next area if he passes. Then one of the examiners approaches the main character to do his assessment, and he extends his hand to begin the physical analysis. The man then holds Yunsol's arm to check his bones and muscles, but as soon as he touches him, the examiner is completely shocked by what he feels. He realizes that the boy's bone and muscle structure is completely ruined. The guard finds it amazing that he even entered the tournament, but soon notices something else, because our main character is staring him down with a terrifying killing intent. And the man realizes that this murderous aura is completely real. Even so, the guard decides he can't let the boy pass because of his condition. Yunchol isn't surprised, as he was already expecting this result. He thinks that he only learned how to wash bodies, so it would be impossible to pass the test. But the young man is determined not to give up on his journey and refuses to accept the end until the first gate is officially closed. Another participant gets furious upon hearing the final result, and he shouts in rage, unable to believe what just happened. The angry guy yells at the head instructor, finding it unfair to choose successors based on bones and muscles. But the instructor just questions him about what exactly is unfair, and explains that bones and muscles are the foundation for learning martial arts. Then he humiliates the guy, saying he couldn't even pass the most basic test and still dares to complain. But the head instructor glares at him with a surprisingly menacing look, and tells the young man not to worry, because there will be a chance for him at the next gate. Because there, the prodigies who have mastered martial arts, even with weak bodies, will be chosen. Next, the instructor announces the start of the second gate for all participants, and with a dark look, he reveals that they will all have to fight each other to survive. The battle will only end when a single participant is left standing at the end. The competitors are shocked by the order, as they don't understand why they have to fight each other. But the guy who complained earlier seems to understand the situation. He thinks this is good because if he has to fight anyway, it might as well be now. So the young man eyes our main character and another boy as his first targets. With that, he grabs his weapon and prepares to throw it. He then hurls it with all his might towards the two of them. Our boy is surprised to see a weapon flying in his direction. However, the target wasn't him, but the boy next to him. The young man gives a terrifying look and says he's finally going to finish him today. The red-haired boy calls him Wine Chung, and then falls to the ground, completely lifeless, leaving all the other participants in shock. Yunsol notices that the attack avoided the ribs and went straight for the opponent's heart. The winner then boasts and challenges anyone to fight him. The head instructor thinks he showed initiative, but calls everyone their trash. The examiner agrees and says that acting dangerous only makes you an easy target. With that, the other competitors become terrified, not knowing what to do. The pressure is so intense that one of them loses his mind and attacks another participant. Right after, the guy is shocked by what he did, as it wasn't his intention. But before the guy could do anything, another competitor attacks him from behind. The head instructor observes the chaos and thinks that the youth are easily influenced by the idea of their own end. With that, panic spreads and everyone starts fighting desperately for their lives. Some participants can't handle the pressure and fall into total despair, while others face off in deadly duels to try and survive. And the instructor concludes that the fear of one's end paralyzes the reason of the weaker ones. But suddenly, he notices something unexpected in the midst of the confusion, and he lets out a little chuckle because he found something interesting. The examiner notices the same thing and is surprised. Our main character and another guy had remained calm and away from the brawl. While most were mindlessly taking each other out, they just watched from a distance. The carnage continued, with more and more participants falling to the ground. Yoonjol just observes the fools who gave in to chaos and fear. They lost their reason because the instructor said only one would survive in the end, and he concludes that the key isn't to take lives but to survive this madness. He then thinks that with calmness and clarity, it's possible to survive the massacre, and he remembers his past as an undertaker and vows that he will survive everything. Instead of fighting, he starts examining the bodies of the fallen. Suddenly, one of the survivors who was fighting with a chain is surprised to see our main character analyzing the bodies on the ground. Meanwhile, Yoonsul was focused, analyzing the marks on one of the bodies. Seeing that the MC was distracted, the guy attacks him, and the chain flies with full force towards the main character. However, the blow ends up hitting the box he was carrying on his back, and with the box broken, its contents spill onto the ground. The man then laughs and asks if the boy is some kind of funeral goods salesman. Yoonsul squats down and starts picking up the items scattered on the ground. He then remembers when he had received those items. It was a sword and a cloak that his grandfather had promised him as a gift. Along with them was a happy birthday letter. And seeing his grandfather's gift destroyed, Yoonsul's eyes fill with pure hatred, and he directs all his hatred towards the jerk who had attacked him, ready to use the sword his grandfather had given him. The chain guy prepares to attack again, and laughs, thinking that a simple blade can't do anything against him. But suddenly, the other guy who was watching the chaos with the main character appears and cuts him down, completely eliminating the chain guy. Then he turns to Yoonsul and says that having a useless person around is good for attracting others' attention. Our main character ignores the taunt and continues gathering his grandfather's gifts. The guy notices that Yoonsul has a sharp gaze but has never learned martial arts, and he boasts, saying he could finish someone like him at any moment. The boy just glares at him from the side, unfazed by the arrogant comment. From a distance, the head instructor observes the guy and notices the sword he's carrying. The examiner explains that his name is Nugun Gang and that he found a secret manual and sword. It turns out these items belong to Mukhyun, one of the greatest masters who ever lived. And so, even though he's self-taught, he's considered his only disciple. The examiner says that Ungang is a strong candidate for the 10 demonic sects and might even win. But the instructor thinks it's a waste for an amateur to have the Seokjong sword, but admits he doesn't see anyone stronger. The examiner agrees with the assessment and says that unless something happens, Ungang will be the winner. Meanwhile, our main character analyzes the cut on one of the bodies and realizes it's quite sloppy. Time passes and the bloody battle continues until finally, the chaos begins to subside. Ungang smiles confidently as he wipes the blood from his sword and says it was just as he expected. He then looks at our main character and is surprised that he survived until the end. Now, only the two of them are left standing in the middle of a courtyard filled with bodies everywhere. The swordsman says that if he finishes the boy, he'll become a candidate and challenges him to a fight. Our main character just stares back at him in silence, showing no reaction. Yoonzel knows that this man is the strongest opponent in the entire training ground. Even so, he firmly grips the sword his grandfather gave him as a gift. And staying calm, he seems to have a plan in mind to win the fight. But instead of attacking, the main character just watches him fight, and then begins to analyze the sword cuts on the bodies to figure out how Ungang fights. And after analyzing everything, he believes he can definitely win the fight. He then starts walking towards Ungang, and the swordsman smiles arrogantly and tells the boy to show him what he's got. Ungang then charges with full force at the MC, and begins to deliver a series of fast and precise strikes, while mocking our main character, saying he only knows how to dodge. But the examiner realizes that there's something more going on here, because with each strike, Yoonsul twists his body slightly to avoid fatal damage. Even after taking several cuts, he manages to stay on his feet in the fight. The examiner is shocked to realize that the boy has memorized the attack patterns. He notes that the main character has an incredible ability for observation and learning. Yoonsul then says that Ungang's sword is pathetic and weak. The swordsman is surprised by the taunt and questions what the boy said. The examiner realizes that Yoonsul is avoiding the blows, but a counterattack is another story. He knows that in the boy's current condition, it will be difficult to land a decent hit. Ungang gets angry at the taunt and says he'll finish the boy quickly. He then charges forward furiously, ready to deliver the final blow. Our main character prepares himself as his opponent is coming with everything he's got. He then realizes he only has one chance to win, and he remembers what he learned from examining the bodies that Ungang defeated, and he noticed that his opponent always attacks the vital points of his victims. Specifically, he aims for the heart and head to ensure victory, and because of this, his blade always goes towards the upper part of the body. Yoonsul then ducks to dodge the attack, and quickly prepares to counterattack. He then remembers his grandfather's words about a specific vital point, that it's a pressure point that even veteran masters have difficulty training. But if hit with force, even a child can take down an adult. Yoonsul then prepares to strike exactly at that point. With that, someone ended up hurt. Yoon-sol landed a direct hit, putting an end to this brutal battle. Gang begins to fall and collapses, completely finished. At the end of the battle, our main character was totally exhausted. He then looks around and wonders if the massacre is finally over. The examiner is shocked by the unexpected outcome of the fight, but the head instructor was disappointed, as he expected more from Mukhyon's disciple. Then he announces that Bus Encel of the Burning Sun sect has passed the second test. With the victory, our main character is excited because his journey of revenge has just begun. Suddenly, he starts to remember the past and hears someone calling his name. It was his grandfather, asking where he was, seeming unable to see him. In the vision, little Yoon-sol happily responds upon hearing his grandfather's voice. The boy runs towards him, but the old man continues to move away slowly. His grandfather says he can't see him, leaving little Yoon-sol confused. Our main character is shocked to see that the image of his bloodied grandfather appears, saying he can't see him. With that, the main character wakes up in a panic, drenched in a cold sweat. He then sits up, startled, and looking around, he realizes he's no longer on the battlefield. The sound of the waves reveals they are on the open sea. He realizes he's on a ship and must have passed out from his injuries in the fight. Surprised, the boy notices he feels almost no pain and wonders if he was treated by a doctor. But he sets that aside and starts observing the people around him. He recognizes some faces and concludes they are the ones who passed the first test, and the other candidates stare at him with looks of pure contempt and arrogance. Our main character was already expecting this, as he's used to being underestimated. Suddenly, an order is given for all participants to disembark from the ship. The examiner then announces that they have arrived at the location of the next challenge, a place with a terrifying landscape that he calls Hell's Path. The man then walks alone across a sinister bridge, claiming that this is hell. The examiner then asks everyone to follow him to the next challenge location. They arrive at a rocky and completely desolate island that seems uninhabited. There, the man says that this place will be their lodging during the training. He orders everyone to return their clothes and choose a cave to stay in. Our main character stares at the caves with a serious and thoughtful look. Then the boy chooses one while the others complain about the place being cramped. Right after, two female candidates start fighting over one of the caves. Yoon-sol thinks they have no idea what happened in the previous test. He notices that many who passed the first test were wearing very expensive clothes. With this, the young man suspects that most of them are from noble and wealthy families, and he understands that the previous test served to eliminate the weaker ones without any trouble. Suddenly, the examiner appears and asks why he hasn't decided yet. The man says the boy is too slow and that it's no time to be dawdling. Then the guard calls Bu Yoon-sol by name, staring at him very seriously, and he says there's no time and that the boy needs to decide quickly what to do. Without hesitation, our main character points to the farthest cave and says he'll take that one. The place seemed to be the worst of all, with a narrow, dark entrance that nobody wanted. And to make matters worse, a disgusting liquid was dripping from the entrance of the cave he chose. One of the noble girls looks at him with contempt, finding his choice disgusting and humiliating. But the examiner gives a malicious smile as he realized the boy's true intention. He then acknowledges that Bu Yoon-sol is a true prodigy for his intelligent choice, because the cave that seemed small and dirty was actually just the entrance. Inside, it was spacious for training, and the narrow entrance served as a defense. The guard praises him for his inspection and tells him to prepare for training immediately. After a while, the main character is already in his new clothes, ready to begin. The examiner then gathers everyone to explain how things would work there. He reveals that Hell has 10 martial halls with the 10 greatest masters, and the candidates could learn one or all of the martial arts, as the choice was theirs. Furthermore, the schedule was free for them to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Our main character finds everything very strange and suspects they wouldn't just let them train in peace. The other candidates start arguing about which martial hall they should go to, and one of them suggests the Firestorm Sword Hall, because he heard it's the strongest. Our main character observes the majority going to the same place, because the Firestorm Sword Hall is considered the strongest of all. But the boy thinks he doesn't need advanced techniques, but something different. And with a determined look, he decides he knows exactly what he needs at the moment. Instead of following the crowd, Yoon-sol runs in a completely different direction. He moves away from the others and goes to a more isolated place on the island. The boy then approaches a small, humble martial hall that looked abandoned, and he wonders if that place can really be called a martial hall. The Nangya Pavilion was a dilapidated hall barely recognized among the 10 great masters, but it remained because it had produced many of the best fighters in history. The main character remembers what his grandfather said and decides he will train there. But as he gets closer, he trips over something on the ground and almost falls. He then looks at the ground and notices something strange and unexpected in his path. Suddenly, a head emerges from the earth right in front of our main character. The buried man introduces himself as Sao, the secret master of the Nangya Pavilion. Yoon-sol is startled by the sudden appearance but remains calm. The boy quickly composes himself and bows to the master, and he says he came to learn the martial arts of the Nangya Pavilion. Sa stares at him with a serious look and sizes him up from head to toe. He then gets up from the earth, revealing he was buried up to his neck, and tells the boy to leave, as he has no intention of teaching anyone. The main character then says he heard that the arts from here grant the greatest vitality in the world. Sao explains that even prodigies can barely master the pavilion's techniques, and warns that in the boy's current condition he wouldn't survive even a day. Our main character then kneels in front of the master and looks at him with determination. He says that since Sao insists on teaching him personally, he must bow as a disciple. The master is speechless at the boy's audacity and calls him crazy, but a slight smile at the corner of his mouth shows that he was impressed. With that, the master finally gives in and says he will teach the boy, but he warns that he will only train him because it's an order order from the demonic hall. Then he introduces himself as the secret master of the Nangya Pavilion and asks to be called Master Sao. Yoon-sul tries to introduce himself, but the man cuts him off abruptly before he can finish, and says that from now on, our main character will be just recruit number 1. The master then says the conversation is over and that the training will begin immediately. In the blink of an eye, he attacks and pokes our main character's eyes with his fingers. The boy is in shock, and his vision starts to go completely dark. And suddenly, everything goes black as if his eyes had been turned off forever. The boy despairs as he can't see anything around him, but Sao's voice calms him and explains that he only sealed his vision temporarily. He says this is a necessary procedure to master the martial arts of the Path of the Beast, and this martial art not only maximizes the senses, but also grants the reflexes of a wild animal. That's why even the basics of the Path of the Beast are as difficult as an advanced technique. And because of this, the number of people willing to face the challenge has decreased over the years. But the master explains that if the boy masters this art, he will become a beast. And with that, the boy will acquire the soul and instincts of a wild animal. Soa then gives a smile and says that most don't make it to that level before they're done for. He warns that it will take the main character about an hour to get used to the blindness. And with that warning, the master says he will return after that time and leaves him alone. Yoon-sul thinks that his other senses should be getting stronger, but that's not happening. He then remembers that the master said it would take an hour to adapt, but the boy thinks that's too slow for his current situation. So he decides he needs to get used to the darkness as quickly as possible. He knows that if he's caught in an ambush in this state, it will be the end for him. And right on cue, an enemy appears from behind, ready to attack the boy. But our main character senses the opponent's presence and turns around quickly. At the last second, he throws himself to the ground and manages to dodge the fatal blow. On the ground, he understands that without sight, the most important thing is his sense of balance. Meanwhile, Master Sao returns home, thinking the boy must be lost somewhere. But as he gets closer, he sees the boy moving and is a bit confused. The master finds this very strange, as most people just stand still and wait. But the boy was moving all over the place, and even fighting imaginary enemies. The young man continued to practice his movements with great agility and precision. With that, he was doing jumps and kicks in the air without stopping for a second. Because of this, the boy was adapting much faster than normal. The old man smiles and says that since he's gotten used to it, the training is about to get tougher. With that, he draws his sword and tells the boy to try and dodge his strikes. And without wasting time, the master charges with a swift attack towards the boy. 3 days pass and we see our main character all beaten up in the middle of the rain. But even injured, he gets up and faces his master, who watches him from a distance. The boy then goes on the attack, showing that his senses are much sharper. However, the master was much stronger and lands a direct hit on his chest. Sao thinks that it's been 3 days and the boy still hasn't complained about the training. And even all banged up, our main character continues to stand with a determined look. The master then asks why the boy doesn't question anything about how to dodge or the techniques. Yoon-sul explains that the old man said the essence of the pavilion was enlightenment, and so he trusted him. Sao is speechless at the boy's intelligent answer and lets out a little laugh. With a smile on his face, the man agrees that the boy's logic is absolutely right. Then he says to continue with the training and advances with another attack. But suddenly, our main character feels something different in his senses. With his eyes closed, he realizes that he can now feel the attack coming towards him. In fact, he could see the path of the sword even though he was completely blind. But the boy notices that he can only see the strike and doesn't have time to dodge it. So he has the brilliant idea of using his own sword to block the attack. And with all his strength, the boy tries to stop his master's powerful blow. The two stare at each other with determined looks as their swords clash. The old man is shocked because the boy managed to block his silent sword technique. And what's most impressive is that he managed to do it in just 3 days of training. Even though he managed to block it, the force of the impact sends our main character flying. Lying on the ground, Yoon-sul wonders if it's that hard to block, and the master offers him a drink. The boy then thanks him and takes the bamboo canteen, all worn out. With that, he starts drinking the liquid while his master watches him from a distance. But suddenly, the young man notices it's not water and feels an energy coursing through his body. The master thinks to himself that he gave him the water from the celestial spring that he had saved his entire life. But he doesn't think it was a waste, because it was totally worth it. Because he had finally found the greatest prodigy he had been waiting for his whole life. After a while, our main character's training continues with much more intensity. Now the master and disciple exchange blows that are faster and more precise, and with his new agility, Yoon-sul can keep up with Sao's movements much better. The boy dodges several attacks with impressive speed, leaving the master surprised. With that, the old man gives a wicked smile because he's having fun with the fight. He then challenges the boy to withstand one more of his powerful blows. Then the master attacks with his sword in a circular and very fast motion, and our main character prepares for the impact with a look full of determination. The boy concentrates for the next blow, and with a swift movement, he manages to block another one of his master's attacks. Our main character is confused because his master suddenly stopped attacking. Sao starts laughing very loudly, saying that he has finally found the genius he had been searching for. Suddenly, the boy feels something strange, and his eyes start to return to normal. Surprised, he realizes his vision is clear again, and the master calls his name. The man then tells him to forget the tournament and become his official disciple, and promises that in 10 years he will turn the boy into one of the greatest masters of the demonic path. Yoon-sul thinks about the proposal and knows it's probably not a lie, but he seems undecided. He remembers the monster that took his grandfather's life and how powerful it was. With that, the boy realizes that the arts of the Nangya Pavilion alone won't be enough, and with a determined look, he refuses the offer and says he's going to become a demonic champion. The master is completely shocked by his disciple's unexpected response. Sao then scoffs and says that not even the celestial demon managed to learn all the arts. He explains that each martial art requires a different type of body and energy, and that even the most talented can only master 2 or 3 different styles at most. Our main character then apologizes to the old man for not accepting the generous offer. Sao just stares at him in silence and realizes that the boy really isn't going to change his mind. With that, the man accepts and says that from now on he will learn a different martial art. The boy is confused because he has barely learned the basics of the Nangya Pavilion's techniques, but without giving any more explanations, the master charges with full force towards his disciple. The boy defends the attack with his sword and is surprised by the force of the blow. So then reveals that the boy has actually already learned the techniques of the Path of the Beast. And with that, our main character understands that all of the master's sword attacks were actually the initial forms of the martial art he had just learned. Yunseo bows and thanks him, but the old man says there's no need to thank him as it was an order. But the boy insists, as he even gave him medicine, and he will never forget that. The man then simply tells the boy to forget what happened between them. Our main character doesn't understand the cold and direct response from his master, and Sao explains that in the martial world it's better to forget both kindness and malice. Our main character remains silent, processing his master's harsh words. The boy then looks at the horizon, thinking about what to do next. With that, he bows in farewell and says he needs to leave to continue his journey. The master just watches his disciple walk away with a pensive look, and he wonders where such an incredible talent like that boy came from. Meanwhile, the boy walks alone, thinking that a bloodstorm is about to begin, but he feels exhausted because his senses are overly sharp due to the Path of the Beast. The young man realizes that at this rate he won't even be able to rest and needs to learn to control himself. So he decides he will suppress his senses whenever he's not in a fight. And with that, the boy concentrates on turning off his senses as if it were a faucet. In his mind, he visualizes the energy calming down and gradually returning to normal. Suddenly, the boy's eyes open, and he seems to have achieved what he wanted. With his senses finally under control, he believes that this is enough for now. Next, the young man takes out a map and starts planning his next move. He thinks he doesn't have much time as the demonic hall won't leave them there forever. With that, our main character decides he has no other choice but to follow his plan. The narration explains about a master who rivaled the celestial demon 700 years ago. His name was Jo Kwaun, the Sword Emperor, and the boy's only option is to go to the sect he founded. With that, the boy arrives at the Hua Wu Sword Sect, ready to begin his new training. He stands in front of the giant door and thinks the place looks like a royal palace. But as he was about to knock, someone opens the door from the inside and surprises him. The guy who opened the door wonders who the mysterious visitor could be. But upon looking at the boy's face, he recognizes him instantly and is shocked. Yunseo bows and says he has come to learn the sword arts of the Hua Wu sect. The master then seems to accept the boy's request and tells him to follow. The man explains that the sect's sword arts are quite extensive and take a long time to learn. He says the others have already finished the beginner's hall and asks why he took so long. Yunseo explains that he was at the Nangya Pavilion and the master is startled and asks if he learned the wild sword. The boy confirms, but the master doubts that he mastered the Path of the Beast in just 2 weeks, and he thinks Master Sao just sent him away so he wouldn't have to deal with him. The man then introduces himself as Jingok, the one in charge of the beginner's hall, and asks to be called leader. He then suggests that our main character go somewhere else as it will be too difficult for him there. But the boy thanks him for the concern and says he will definitely learn the sword arts of the Hua Wu sect. The instructor accepts the boy's decision and prepares to show him something, and with a swift movement, he moves across the hall, leaving a trail of dust behind. Next, he shows a scroll with the 13 basic forms of the sect and tells the boy to practice. Our main character is left clueless, with a look of pure confusion on his face. Then the young man asks what exactly he should do with that enormous scroll. The instructor is confused by the question and asks if the boy can't read the diagrams. The boy confirms he can't read, leaving the master completely shocked by the answer. He then explains that before arriving there, he had never studied swordsmanship in his entire life. The instructor is visibly irritated by his new student's unexpected situation. So he asks if the boy has never had any kind of sword training, and the young man confirms. The man thinks this makes sense, as the boy's records list him as a scholar. Even so, he's surprised the boy can't read the basic manual but soon thinks of something else. He remembers the boy's reflexes in the second test and his choice of cave. Then he realizes that if the boy is starting from scratch with so much talent, with the right instruction he could become an extremely powerful master in the future. With that, he asks if the boy can read the letters and asks him to read a part. The phrase said how to release the body and flow effortlessly in a fight. The instructor explains that releasing the body means relaxing the muscles to move smoothly. Our main character then tries to imitate what the master said, but ends up in a strange pose. With that, the man helps him correct his posture and asks him to calm his mind and flow. And in that same instant, the boy manages to get the posture right with impressive precision. The instructor is shocked because the boy grasped the idea the moment he explained it. With a smile on his face, he praises the boy's posture and continues the training. Next, the master holds the boy's sword to teach the correct movement, but our main character gets annoyed and tells the instructor to let go of his sword immediately. The boy's unexpected reaction ends up leaving the master completely startled. After a while, the young man continues to train alone with great dedication, and he continues to practice the sword movements with great dedication and effort. The boy advances with a quick and precise strike, showing his great progress in training. With a smile, the instructor realizes that the boy has a natural talent for the sword. The man then asks the young man to imagine an opponent and use the 13 forms. The master explains that this is the promotion test for the next hall. Our main character understands that the chance came earlier than expected, and he needs to prove himself. With that, the boy prepares to start the sex promotion test. He then focuses on the imaginary enemy that he needs to defeat no matter what. In his mind, a dark and threatening enemy appears before him. With a determined look, the young man grips the hilt of his sword tightly, then he attacks with the first of the 13 forms of the Hua Wu sect. The instructor is completely shocked by what he just saw before him. But the boy doesn't stop and continues his attack without a second's hesitation. Next, he already uses the third form with impressive speed. The master can't believe it and wonders if those are really the 13 forms. The instructor thinks that the floating rain technique should be smooth and agile, but the boy's version was completely different from what he knew. The boy's strikes were unexpectedly sharp and filled with a contained fury. The man wonders if the young man is altering the form on purpose to create something new, and he notes that the adapted form has a murderous intent, as if for revenge. With that, he wonders what secret the boy is hiding to have so much hatred in his heart. The master realizes that the trajectory of the boy's blade is being shaped by something, and he wonders if this is the wild sword in action in the boy's movements. Because the more he uses the 13 forms, the clearer the mark of the wild sword becomes. The boy notices that he is merging the two arts, and this could create a new style. So he decides to force himself back to the original form so as not to lose control. With a determined look, the young man focuses on returning to the sect's original technique. But suddenly, the image of the imaginary enemy completely changes before him, and the boy sees the silhouette of the man who took his beloved grandfather's life. With that, his eyes fill with fury, and an uncontrollable hatred takes over him. Overcome by rage, the boy grinds his teeth with great force. Blinded by hatred, he charges towards his grandfather's killer. With that, he unleashes the 7th sequence of the 13 forms of the sect, but the imaginary enemy defends the blow with great ease. The boy is in shock at his opponent's absurd speed. Without wasting time, the killer counterattacks with a devastating blow. The attack is faster than anything he has ever faced, and the enemy just gives a wicked smile from under his hood. The force of the blow is so great that it sends our main character flying. But the boy knows he can't give him even a second to breathe, so he decides to use all the remaining forms at once. And with a cry of fury, the young man unleashes all his power at once. But the killer manages to block the sequence of blows with his sword. Even so, the energy of the attack still hits the enemy's body, and the impact of the shock ends up injuring our main character's arm. With that, the imaginary enemy finally dissipates into smoke, and our main character's sweat starts to drip onto the hall floor. The boy is panting and totally exhausted after the intense fight. With that, he realizes he's still not even close to being strong enough. The boy then thinks that in the end, he was defeated by the enemy. But the instructor gives a slight smile at the result of the fight, and to the boy's surprise, the man says he passed the promotion test. The master explains that the test evaluates swordsmanship mastery and the application of the 13 forms. Then he throws his own sword into the air to show the boy something, and says that the young man demonstrated his skills very well during the test. With that, he grips the sword firmly to emphasize his explanation, and praises the execution of the 13 forms, and sends him to the next hall. The boy thinks about the instructor and how difficult it must have been to teach him from scratch. With that, he bows in gratitude for all the master's help and patience. The man then smiles and asks the boy to continue training with dedication, but before saying goodbye, the instructor has one last piece of advice for the boy. He warns him that his sword has a murderous intent and tells him not to be consumed by it. Our main character becomes a bit pensive at the instructor's unexpected warning. Watching the boy leave, Jingok thinks that now he understands how he learned so quickly, and with a smile he says goodbye and finds the young man's learning speed impressive. The boy's promotion to the intermediate hall was much faster than expected. At first the master doubted, but now he is sure of the boy's potential. With a smile, he wonders what the next instructor's reaction will be upon seeing him. And so our main character arrives at the intermediate hall, where things are about to get real. The young man enters the hall with his chest out, ready for whatever comes his way. Inside, the new instructor and another student look at him with unfriendly faces. The new master immediately starts humiliating the boy, saying he's wasting his time there. The boy explains that he was late because he spent the first 15 days at the Nanya Hall. The old man gets annoyed and thinks the boy is just a kid who ran away from the tough training there. Even so, he tells the boy to sit down but doubts he'll be able to keep up. The instructor begins the class by explaining that the Fire Rain sword art is very fast, and because of its speed, it's a very difficult technique to use in combat. He says the goal of the class is to assess each person's proficiency with the sword. With that, he calls a student named Byok Hansong and tells him to choose an opponent. The guy asks if he can choose anyone, and the master confirms he can. So the young man points to our main character with a mocking smile on his face, and he says the master promised he could name anyone there. The old man gets irritated with the student's attitude and tells him to choose someone else. But before he can finish, our main character says he accepts the duel right away. With that, the boy says he will fight, leaving everyone shocked by his decision. The young man explains that he learned from instructor Jin and wants to test his skills. The master thinks the boy is just trying to protect his wounded pride. He then sighs and seems to give up trying to argue with the two students. With that, he accepts the duel and hopes the boy's skills are good enough. The opponent thinks this is his chance to stand out and finish the newbie. The two then prepare for the duel while the other students watch. Our main character faces the opponent and admits that he's quite brave. The guy scoffs and says you don't survive in the martial world with just bravado. And without wasting time, the young man charges forward with a swift and powerful blow. Our main character dodges the attack with an agile and precise movement. The opponent is impressed by the boy's speed but doesn't give up. He continues attacking, but the young man manages to block the blow with his sword. But while defending, the boy feels that his movements are still very clumsy. The opponent notices this and with a wicked smile confirms that he is a novice. And with that, he mocks the boy and prepares his most powerful strike. With a laugh, he unleashes the fire rain sword towards the young man. But he stops laughing when he notices the boy is dodging his strikes. Our main character moves with incredible agility and dodges everything. The opponent becomes furious for not being able to land a single hit on the newbie. And with that, the exchange of blows continues with great intensity and speed. From a distance, the instructor watches the fight and finds the opponent's style pathetic. But he is intrigued by our main character and his way of fighting. The old man realizes that the boy doesn't dodge with speed but with prediction. The narration explains that the Beast Dao art is very difficult to master. In fact, it is a supreme martial art that only the greatest masters can use, and so it would be impossible for the boy to have learned it in just 15 days. The opponent gets annoyed and says he won't be evaluated if he just keeps dodging. Then our main character goes on the attack with a look full of determination. And with a swift movement, he uses one of the techniques he learned in the sect. The other students are shocked as they recognize the art of the fire rain sword. The opponent scoffs and wonders if the boy is really going to use a move from his own art. But one of the female students notices that there's something subtly different about the boy's movement. The young man boasts, saying he can defend the attack with his eyes closed. But when he tries to defend, he is surprised by the force of the boy's blow. With that, he wonders what that was and how the newbie can be so strong. He wonders if the boy is hiding his skills to mock him, and he thinks he's doing this to get the instructor's attention and goes straight to the advanced hall. With that, the guy realizes that if he continues like this, he'll end up being overshadowed by the newbie. Furious, the young man grinds his teeth and decides he won't let that happen. He shouts that he's the one going to the advanced hall and uses the Asura sword method. With that, he unleashes a powerful blow towards our main character. The instructor recognizes the blow from the Asura sword sect and isn't surprised, but he is shocked by something else he noticed during the fight, because the boy's balance didn't waver at all during the attack. With that, the old man is convinced that the boy really did learn the art of the Beast Dao. The opponent gets annoyed by the young man's ability to dodge all his blows, so he decides he's going to end the fight once and for all with his next attack. From a distance, the instructor is surprised by what is about to happen in the duel, and with a cry of fury, the guy unleashes a technique called Bloodwind Annihilates the Moon. The two swords then clash with impressive force and speed. The force of the impact is so great that a red explosion echoes through the hall. The other students and the instructor are shocked by the unexpected outcome of the fight. In the end, our main character manages to overcome his opponent with his incredible skill. The young man falls to the ground, completely defeated and with no strength to continue. Our main character just observes the fallen body with a cold and victorious look. And with that, the boy is crowned the winner of the duel with mastery. The other students are shocked and can't believe what they just saw. One of them wonders if the boy's opponent ended up kicking the bucket. In the background, we see the young man's body lying on the ground, not moving an inch. Our main character just observes the scene in silence and with great calm. The instructor approaches and confirms that the guy was hit in a vital point. With that, he looks at the young man lying on the ground and confirms the sad news. Next, the old man turns to our main character and asks if he was from the Nanya Pavilion. The boy explains that he mastered the beast sword in just half a month. The master scoffs and says that the pavilion now teaches its students to lie. The instructor gets annoyed with the boy's excuse and orders the body to be removed. The other students are shocked and think the boy should be punished. But the master explains that this is hell, and whoever uses a deadly technique must be prepared for the worst. After the chaos, the test resumes, and the students go back to dueling each other. But they all seem discouraged and unwilling to continue fighting. And in the end, they all end up being defeated one by one in the test. The instructor then says that everyone there has failed and tells them to leave. The students beg for another chance, but the old man says it's impossible. He explains that to master the WoW sword, one must have unparalleled talent. And since they couldn't do that, they all failed the sex test. With a look of contempt, the master tells them all to get out of his sight. The students then leave the hall with their heads down, completely defeated. But suddenly, the old man notices that our main character is still standing there. He then turns around and asks why the boy hasn't left the hall yet, and the young man asks if he has to leave too, leaving the master confused. The instructor explains that he passed the test and can go to the advanced hall. But the boy says he will stay there because he wants to learn more things before moving on. The old man doesn't understand and asks why he would do such a thing. The boy explains that he hasn't learned anything from the intermediate hall yet and wants to stay. The master gets annoyed and says he has already mastered the beast sword and dismantled the Sura style. The young man confirms, and the old man laughs, not believing the boy's audacity. Even so, he decides to teach the Waobio Crow sword to the boy. But he warns that he despises tricks to impress and makes a threat, and says that if he finds any trace of another style, he will finish the boy. 4 days pass and the master watches the young man training intently. He notes that the boy's fundamentals are practically non-existent, but he is shocked to think that he really just started learning the sword now. The instructor realizes that the boy's tenacity and obsession are incredible, because he dedicates himself to every moment as if his life depended on it. With a smile, the old man understands how he mastered the beast sword so quickly. The boy continues to train, unleashing a powerful yellow energy from his sword. But suddenly, the instructor tells him to stop training right away. The old man says he has already understood the essence of the Waobio Crow sword and can stop. He explains that this style is useless in a real fight because of its movements, but the master is intrigued by the way the boy is using the technique, and the young man replies that the purpose of a sword style is to finish the enemy. The instructor explains that demonic martial arts require murderous intent, and he warns that if the boy doesn't erase that intent, he will create an art that will harm him. The boy thinks that the old man is saying the same thing that instructor Jingak said, The master remembers his past and how he lived with a killer sword, and he recounts how he destroyed everything in his path without a second's hesitation. Because of this, his honor and his martial arts fell to a lower level. The old man then says that from now on, the young man must abandon his murderous intent. The boy remembers his grandfather saying that the past of martial artists is sad, and that the people of the martial world are the ones who suffer the most from pain and loss. The old man says they despise talking about their difficult pasts. The boy is confused and asks why the instructor is telling him all this, and the master explains that he also harbored a killer sword for a long time. Next, he asks for the boy's name to know more about him. The young man introduces himself as Bu Yun Sol, and the old man seems to recognize the name. He then realizes that the boy was the only one who survived the second hall. With that, the instructor says that our main character has a big problem. The boy gets worried and asks what the problem might be, and the old man explains that he has no foundation in martial arts, and that the gap between him and the other prodigies will only widen over time. To close this gap, he needs to learn a superior martial art quickly. So the master decides to teach him a technique that he created himself. And with that, he will pass on the Genro Mosang to our main character. But he warns that he failed while learning the technique, and all the nerves in his fingers were severed, and that the style is so dangerous that the boy might even lose the use of his arms. The boy thinks about the risk but knows he needs to get stronger for his revenge. He then kneels before the master and accepts the training without hesitation. With eyes full of hatred, the young man thanks him for the opportunity to get stronger. A month passes and our main character finally leaves the intermediate hall. He thinks it took longer than expected to master the new technique. After learning the basic and advanced arts, he moves on to the next step. And with that, the boy arrives at the advanced hall where the best train. Our main character faces the new challenge with a serious and determined look. The new instructor observes him intently while the other students meditate. The young man feels that the air there is different and much heavier than in the other halls. He notices a powerful energy coming from the other students in the place and realizes that the contempt in their eyes has completely disappeared. The boy knows this happened because he defeated Byok Hansong in the duel. He thinks about how cleaning bodies earned him contempt, but taking a life brought admiration. The master then calls him by name and invites him to join the class that is about to begin. The instructor begins the class by explaining about the Song of the Huawu Sword. He reads the teachings that speak of strength, balance, and containment. The boy realizes he wouldn't have understood anything if he hadn't trained in the intermediate hall. After class, the master calls our main character for a private conversation. The boy is a little apprehensive but follows the instructor without question. The two walk through a garden and the old man begins to explain a concept. He says that triumphing over the sword means defeating an opponent even without a blade. With that, the master picks up a tree branch to demonstrate his explanation, and with a swift movement, he attacks the boy with the branch, as if it were a sword. The old man then asks what the boy would do if he were attacked without a sword. Our main character doesn't know what to answer, and the master continues his explanation. He says that the other students have already mastered the first technique of the Huawu sword, and warns that if the boy can't keep up, he will be expelled from the hall. The young man closes his eyes and concentrates to think of an answer to the question. Suddenly, his eyes open and he seems to have found the solution to the problem. With a determined look, he says he will use his opponent's blade, and with a swift movement, he advances towards the master to grab the branch. The boy reaches out his hand to try and get the branch, but the old man is much faster. The instructor finds the boy's judgment a bit hasty and prepares for the attack. In the blink of an eye, the master is already behind the boy, who is shocked by the speed. He realizes it's impossible to predict where the old man will dodge next. Our main character didn't expect to catch the master with his attack, but he is shocked that he can't even keep up with his movements. The young man knows that if he doesn't show something now, he will be expelled from the hall. So he decides to use his beast perception to its limit to read the instructor's movements. With that, he reaches his hand towards the master to try and grab the branch. And for a brief moment, he manages to touch the tip of the branch with his fingers. But the old man is much more experienced and manages to dodge at the last second. The impact of the master's movement sends our main character flying. And with that, the boy falls to the ground, completely defeated by the instructor's speed. Even on the ground, the boy grinds his teeth in great pain and frustration. But he looks at his hand and realizes he managed to grab a leaf from the branch. With that, the instructor starts to laugh and says that our main character passed the test. The young man is surprised and wonders why he passed if he couldn't even hit the master. The old man explains that tomorrow he will start learning the Hyongyu and Hyeon technique. With that, the boy bows in gratitude and promises to be there before dawn. The master then walks away, and the boy watches him leave in silence. The old man looks at the branch in his hand and notices that one of the leaves has been torn off. And with a slight smile, he throws the branch away with a swift and precise movement. The instructor turns and looks at the leaf the boy tore off with his speed. He then thinks that even as a cub, a wolf is still a wolf. With a smile on his face, the old man thinks things are getting very interesting. At the end of the day, the sun begins to set on the horizon with a beautiful landscape. Our main character walks alone and thinks that the day's lesson is finally over. He then decides that instead of resting, he will explore Hell's Path a little more. He knows that a fight could break out at any moment in that place. Suddenly, the boy hears approaching footsteps and becomes alert. With his eyes closed, he concentrates to feel the presence of his enemies. He manages to count 1, 2, 3, 4 and realizes there are 5 people. With that, he opens his eyes and prepares for the imminent confrontation. A group of 5 guys appears and calls our main character by name. Their leader accuses him of being arrogant and says it's time to put an end to it. And with a mocking smile, he says the 5 of them are known as the Swords of the 5 Peaks. Our main character just stares at them in silence, showing no reaction. But he notices there's one more person hidden nearby, watching the scene. The guys get annoyed and advance to attack the young man who challenged them. With a cry of fury, our main character charges into the attack without hesitation. And with a quick strike, he hits the group's leader right in the neck. The guy falls to the ground, lifeless, leaving his companions shocked by the scene. The other 4 are paralyzed with fear, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, the hidden person appears and calls the fallen leader by name. She then turns to our main character and calls him over for a chat. With a serious look, the girl says the 2 of them need to talk about something. The other guys are surprised and wonder why she appeared there. The girl tells them to get lost and says this has nothing to do with them. Afraid, the guys prepare to flee the scene as quickly as possible, and with one last threat, they run, leaving our main character alone with the girl. The young man thinks that the girl who appeared is much stronger than the others. He calls her a coward, and she agrees with a smile on her face. With eyes full of intensity, the girl stares at our main character. She then asks directly which side he's on in the coming war. The girl draws her sword and prepares for what might happen next. Our main character is surprised by the question and doesn't know what to answer. Back in the hall, the instructor says it's now time to see the students' creations. With a serious look, the old man turns to our main character and calls him by name. With that, the master asks them to perform a technique called Hyanji Hyan in front of everyone. Our main character then prepares with his sword in hand, ready to show his skill. He closes his eyes and concentrates fully on the task he needs to perform there. Suddenly, his eyes open with an uncontrollable fury and hatred. With that, the young man unleashes a sequence of strikes filled with a red energy. He then jumps into the air and delivers a powerful attack towards the ground. The boy finishes the technique and the energy from his strikes echoes throughout the hall. The master says he turned a delicate form into something full of murderous intent. Even so, the old man tells him to return to his spot and calls the next student. The next to present is a guy named Seo Jin-ha, who stands up calmly. The young man stares at our main character with a serious and challenging look. Yoon-sol notices the guy's attitude and watches him very carefully. Seo Jin-ha then unleashes a powerful purple aura, preparing to attack, but instead of the technique, he uses a counterattack towards our main character. The narration explains that the guy's attack was like a warning to our hero. Our main character is confused and asks what she means by which side he's on. The girl gets annoyed and yells at him not to play dumb with a furious look. She says that not everyone there wants to become one of the 10 demonic successors. With that, he realizes that the registration process was ridiculously easy, and that this incredible opportunity could also be a trap to lure someone in. The scene shows a wolf being caught in a trap as a metaphor for the situation. With that, the boy asks in shock if she's saying there's a spy among them. The girl analyzes the boy's expression and realizes he's not lying, so she concludes that it's not him and sheathes her sword, looking a little disappointed. She then warns him to behave and keep his head down in the training hall. And with a threatening look, she says she'll finish him if he irritates her again. After the warning, the girl turns and leaves, leaving our main character alone. The boy thinks about the word spy and realizes he didn't know a lot of what was going on. He remembers he was focused only on learning martial arts for his revenge, but he decides that it doesn't matter if it's a spy or another demon, because they are all enemies. The boy watches the sunset and thinks that something big is about to begin. With that, time passes, and night falls on the island, bringing an atmosphere of tension. The scene then shows the training hall from above with a mysterious shadow. Back in the hall, the instructor announces that from that day on, all training is over. He says he imagines many found the study of martial arts principles quite boring, but the old man explains that even masters need to study, because knowing and doing are different things. Then the instructor guarantees that his teachings will be a great advantage for them in the future. With a serious look, the master prepares to give his final words to the students. Next, he wishes them good luck in the battles to come, and the sound of a gong echoes. The students are surprised by the sound and wonder what's happening there. The old man then shouts that the time has come and tells everyone to go to the Stone Mountain. The scene shows the enormous and terrifying Stone Mountain that will be the next challenge. All the candidates then gather at the base of the mountain in front of 2 leaders. The girl informs the head instructor that everyone has gathered, and he just nods. Our main character looks at the scene with a tired and expressionless face. With a sinister smile, the head instructor says that from that moment on, the 3rd gate will finally begin for all candidates. The students are confused and wonder why it's the 3rd and not the 2nd. Our main character then remembers the deadly fight he had and understands that was the 2nd test. The man warns that the caves will be sealed and they won't be able to go back there. With that, all the candidates are shocked by the unexpected warning. One of the guys then asks how the 10 candidates will be chosen. The old man just calls them fools for not understanding the situation. And with a gesture, he gives the order for everyone there to finish each other. He says the fight will only stop when only 10 candidates are left standing. The students are shocked by the order, but one of them gives a wicked smile. The instructor explains that they can hide, but it won't last long, because over time, the safe areas will become more and more restricted for them, and those who remain in the restricted zones will be attacked by killer ghosts. Our main character feels the murderous aura of the ghosts and becomes tense with the situation. One of the girls notes that those creatures are masters with incredible abilities. One of the guys then asks if they can attack the killer ghosts, The head instructor lets out a laugh and says that a candidate needs to be able to handle at least that. He then confirms that they can be attacked and even defeated by the strongest, and with a wicked smile, he reveals that whoever defeats a ghost becomes one of the 10 instantly. With that, the students realize it's harder to defeat a ghost than the other candidates. The instructor then warns that they can form groups or set up ambushes if they want. With a clenched fist, he shouts that this is the only way to become one of the candidates. After the announcement, all the candidates scatter across the stone mountain. Without wasting time, our main character starts running as fast as he can. He thinks he has already drawn too much attention from the others and needs to be careful now. The boy knows that if he doesn't get out of there soon, he could be surrounded by the others like last time. So he decides that the first thing to do is to go to a very safe place, and the safest place he can think of is the cabin of one of his former masters. With that, the young man arrives at the location and suddenly stops, noticing something strange. The boy finds it odd and thinks the ground looks different than before. With that, he crouches down and touches the ground to feel the difference. And with his heightened senses, he realizes someone is approaching. With his sharp perception, he can see 3 people coming his way. One of the guys runs towards him and desperately shouts for help. Our main character just watches the scene in silence and with great caution. The guy promises a reward, but our hero wonders if it's a trick. But with his trained eye, he analyzes the guy carefully, and he realizes that all of the young man's injuries are completely real. And with his sharp vision, he notices that the 3 pursuers have teamed up. He doesn't want to get involved, but knows his position could be exposed because of this. The guy looks at him with a desperate expression, hoping for his help. With that, he stomps his foot hard on the ground and creates a wall of earth in front of them. Next, the young man turns and faces the bushes that were right behind them, and with a punch, he opens a hole in the middle of the bushes, creating a passage. While the two hide, the group of pursuers arrives and finds no one. The leader gets angry and swears he'll finish the boy when he finds him. Without wasting time, he and his men destroy the earth wall and continue the search. On the other side of the wall, our main character and the guy watch the scene. He then buries them both in the earth to hide even further from the enemies. After a while, they come out, and the panting guy thanks him for being saved. Our main character just watches him in silence with a pensive look. He realizes that the hole is not just for hiding, but also for something else. With his heightened senses, the young man can feel the vibrations of the ground. He can hear the sound of his enemies' feet and the sound of their swords. With this, he can get an exact sense of the situation around him. The boy realizes that the path of the beast works even better underground. And with his eyes closed, he finally understands what his master wanted to teach him. After the revelation, he comes back to his senses and looks at the guy who is still there. Our main character then stares at him with a serious and intense look. The guy then composes himself and introduces himself to our hero. He says his name is Guillaume Chaillon and asks for the young man's name. But our hero ignores him, and the guy feels awkward and asks if they can go together. He says he fled to the forest, but everyone attacked him relentlessly. So he asks if he can come along because he feels he can trust our hero. Our main character remains silent, and the guy takes that as a yes. With that, the two start walking together through the dangerous forest. Suddenly, the guy looks at our main character with a very strange smile on his face. Our hero stops and says there's a battle happening, and the young man is impressed. But our hero ignores him and says they'll see what they can do there. Suddenly, he hears a girl's voice vowing revenge for her brothers. The word revenge echoes in our hero's mind as he feels the same hatred. The guy notices the change in our hero and asks what happened to him. Our main character says the plan has changed and that he's joining the fight, shocking the young man. With that, the two hide in the bushes to watch the fight from a distance. But suddenly, an assassin appears out of nowhere and attacks them by surprise. Our main character manages to block the attack at the last second with his sword. The assassin is shocked that his technique was blocked and asks if he's one of them too. Ignoring the question, our hero counterattacks with a swift and precise blow. He unleashes a red energy from his sword and charges with full force at the enemy. With a single blow, the assassin falls to the ground, defeated with no chance to react. The boy thinks that if it weren't for the path of the beast, the fight would have been much more boring. His companion is disgusted by the blood, but our hero isn't fazed by the scene. He then turns his attention back to the main battle that is still going on. With red eyes, he wonders if helping in the fight will satisfy his thirst for revenge. He sees the girl surrounded by assassins and several bodies lying on the ground around her. All beaten up, the girl says it's over and tells the enemies to finish the fight quickly. One of the assassins says he'll finish her quickly, but suddenly notices something. Our main character then appears out of nowhere and attacks one of the assassins with full force. The enemy is shocked by the speed and wonders who the mysterious boy is. With red eyes, our hero faces the assassin, ready for combat, and he says he just needs to finish the enemy to solve the problem. The assassin is shocked by the force of the blow and curses the young man in anger. But with no time to breathe, the other two assassins attack him at the same time. Our main character grinds his teeth as the fight is getting much more difficult. Even so, he manages to land a fatal blow on one of the enemies in the midst of the chaos. And in the blink of an eye, he defeats another one with a swift and precise strike. With that, the last assassin shouts for him to go to the next world and attacks him with everything he has. Blood splatters on our hero's face, who has a vacant and terrifying look. And with one last blow, he finishes the assassin once and for all. Blood flies everywhere, and the fight finally comes to an end. Meanwhile, the girl also finishes her own fight with a look of pure fury. Her eyes glow with a white and terrifying energy in the darkness. With that, she starts to laugh creepily, covered in blood from head to toe. And with a smile on her face, she says she has finally gotten her long-awaited revenge. Our hero observes the bodies lying on the ground with a vacant and pensive look. From a distance, his companion wonders if the fight is finally over. He then approaches and praises our hero's skills, but with a wicked smile, he says the young man can't let his guard down. In the blink of an eye, he tries to hit our hero with a dagger, but the boy manages to block the attack at the last second with his sword. He then counterattacks with a swift and precise blow towards the traitor. The guy is in shock as he didn't expect our hero to be able to dodge. Our main character says that because of him, he can't ask one last question. He gets annoyed and asks when the young man discovered his evil plan. Our hero reveals that he knew everything from the beginning, and the traitor is shocked. He explains that when he hit him in the earth, he felt his body was full of weapons, and also noticed the stiffness of his spine as if he were carrying something. He says he kept him around because he was curious about his methods. The boy thinks that observing others' tricks could be useful in the future. The traitor then grinds his teeth, unable to believe what just happened. Furious, he throws several daggers and shouts that his performance was perfect. But our hero manages to dodge all the weapons with great ease. The guy is shocked and wonders if the young man can predict his movements. With his red eyes, the main character focuses completely on the fight, and with incredible speed, he dodges all the daggers coming his way. One of the daggers he dodged ends up hitting the traitor's shoulder dead on. Our hero then says that hidden weapons are useless if they're discovered, and he holds one of the enemy's daggers with a victorious smile on his face. The traitor is furious at the humiliation and glares at him with hatred in his eyes. With a cry of rage, the guy charges forward to attack our hero head-on. Our main character just watches the attack with a cold and emotionless look. With a swift movement, our hero's sword glows with a red hue, and with a powerful blow, he advances to finish the traitor once and for all. The blade hits the enemy dead on, and the fight finally comes to an end. The blow lands squarely, and the traitor has a look of shock and despair on his face. With that, the guy's body falls to the ground, and our hero stands victorious. He admits that the fight wasn't easy and would have been dangerous if he hadn't noticed his techniques. The boy stares at the body on the ground with a cold and pensive look. The traitor's life slowly fades, and he lies there on the ground. Even at the end, his face showed a bizarre obsession with life. Our hero turns and walks away from the body with a serious look on his face. He then walks through the battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies, and the young man approaches the girl who was kneeling beside one of the bodies. The girl had a look of pure satisfaction for having achieved her revenge. He then asks how she feels and if he will also smile like that in the end. The girl lifts her dirty face and looks at him with a vacant expression, and with a smile on her face, she seems to be at peace with what she's done. The boy then picks up the sword of one of the fallen and grips it firmly, and with two swords in hand, he continues his journey in search of revenge. As our main character walked away, someone was watching him from the shadows. The mysterious figure then wonders if that was the boy they had heard about, and a dark smoke spreads through the area as the analysis continues. The observer notes that the boy used basic techniques to defeat assassins, and considers him a remarkable talent, but says there are many others like him there. With that, he concludes that the young man needs to get stronger to survive. The next day, our main character was already being pursued again. The group leader shouts not to let him escape as he is alone. The man then attacks with a bladed whip towards our hero, but the boy manages to block the blow with his sword with great skill. The force of the impact creates sparks and shows the intensity of the fight. Even so, the whip manages to graze our hero's shoulder. He knows that if he continues like this, he'll end up kicking the bucket. So he decides he needs to come up with a plan to get rid of all of them. And from a distance, the head instructor watches the scene from the top of a mountain. He then asks what the situation is, and the assistant says that out of 86, 41 remain. The head instructor is annoyed because even after 3 days, there are still many candidates left. Meanwhile, our main character continues to fight with everything he has against the group of enemies. The old man thinks that only the capable ones are left and that it's time to truly test their skills. With that, the assistant hands a map to the head instructor as requested. Back in the fight, the enemy uses a strange weapon and manages to trap the boy's swords. With a smirk, the man boasts and says he finally caught the boy, but our hero surprises him and simply lets go of the trapped swords. With that, he starts running, and the leader shouts that the young man is fleeing once again. He thinks that fighting in an open field is a major disadvantage because of their weapons, so the boy decides that the first thing to do is to go to a more enclosed space. From a distance, the head instructor looks at the map and says he will restrict that area. Our main character continues to run but suddenly feels that something bad is about to happen. The old man then points to a location on the map and orders the assassins from the sword hall to be released. With that, a dark aura covers the place, and the assassins are finally let loose. And with that, the boy runs desperately to the Firestorm Sword Hall. Inside, he leaves a trail of blood on the floor to lure his enemies. The pursuers arrive and find the pool of blood and are confused by the scene. They then look at the hall's sign and decide to go inside to look for the young man. With that, the group begins to walk carefully through the dark corridors of the place. The leader scoffs and says the cornered rat seems to be quite desperate, and he boasts that the boy can't escape his white horse squadron. But suddenly, the man senses a strange presence and is on high alert. One of the released assassins attacks him from behind and he shouts to be careful. The leader gets annoyed and calls the assassin a fool, thinking such a trick wouldn't work. But suddenly, our main character appears in front of them, ready to fight. He then advances and manages to block the leader's attack with his sword. The man is shocked by the speed and force of our hero's blow, and wonders how the boy is managing to read his squadron's movements. Our main character just stares at him with a cold and determined look. Then with a swift and precise blow, he attacks the squadron leader. One of the assassins is then defeated, and his companion is shocked by the scene. The man gets annoyed because now he has to fight one of the released assassins. With that, another member of the group also goes on the attack with his weapon, but he soon realizes that the place is too tight to use his weapon properly. Our main character seizes the opportunity and advances to attack the enemy. With a swift and accurate blow, he hits the man, who screams in pain. The other group member is terrified to see one of the assassins behind him, and he finally understands that our main character lured them into a trap. The young man thinks that fighting there forces the group to tighten its formation, and therefore their power decreases, and he can defeat them one by one. With his plan in action, the boy manages to defeat all the enemies easily. The survivors then charge with everything they have in a desperate attack. The swords then clash with impressive force and speed. Our main character dodges the blow and jumps to counterattack from above. The guy falls to the ground and realizes the whip hit the wall because of the space. With that, the enemies see the perfect chance to flee and get out of there. But one of them screams as he is grabbed from behind by a mysterious hand in the middle of his escape. The young man is then confused, not understanding who just grabbed him. Suddenly, one of the released assassins appears and asks what they are doing. The man is furious and questions if the guys are trying to run from him. One of the members tries to explain that the place isn't good for fighting, but the assassin doesn't want to hear excuses and attacks the group with full force. And with uncontrollable fury, he finishes all the members of the squadron. Then the assassin complains that he shouldn't have brought those losers with him. From a distance, our main character observes the whole scene, hidden behind a pillar. He then comes out of hiding and asks if the man is the group's leader. The assassin praises the young man's skill and asks about his sword technique. He introduces himself as Wu Mun-chung and asks for our hero's name. The man then stands there, waiting for a response from our main character. Our main character looks at him, surprised, and starts to say something. But the assassin lets out a laugh and says he doesn't need to know the name of someone who's about to pass on. Without wasting time, the man charges with a powerful blow from his blade. The boy manages to block the attack but is shocked by the enemy's weapon. The force of the impact is so great that the young man's sword shatters into pieces. The man scoffs and asks if they only taught him the defensive style in class. Our hero is shocked and wonders how the enemy knows about a secret technique. He then suspects that the man has an information network he doesn't know about. The enemy shouts for him to stop thinking in the middle of a fight and advances again. With a wicked smile, the man attacks with his blade with all his strength. The blow is so powerful that it destroys everything it touches, whether it's the wall or the ceiling. The boy realizes he has no advantage fighting him in an enclosed space. With that, he throws a piece of his sword and runs towards a dark door. Next, the young man jumps and breaks through the door to get out of the hall as quickly as possible. And with a determined look, he prepares to continue the fight outside. The boy holds what's left of his sword with a look of pure determination. The enemy follows him out and calls him disappointing for running from the fight, and he boasts that the boy's technique is horrible and can't beat his style. Our hero then uses what's left of his sword to block the enemy's blow. With that, the man unleashes a sequence of attacks with his whip-like weapon. The young man is surrounded by the opponent's attacks and seems to be in a very difficult situation. And in the blink of an eye, he is completely trapped inside a sphere of attacks. The enemy lets out a laugh and says that the white horse whip will take the boy's life. The force of the attacks creates an intense glow, showing the power of the man's technique. Our main character thinks that his defensive style can block but doesn't have the strength to break the weapon. So he closes his eyes and concentrates to think about what he needs to do to win. And he remembers what one of his masters taught him about a special technique. With that, the young man grips the hilt of his broken sword with all his strength, his eyes open, revealing a new determination and a hidden power. The enemy feels the change in the atmosphere and is confused by what is happening. The man scoffs and thinks the boy is just trying a last desperate fight. But suddenly, a yellow energy starts to emanate from within the sphere of attacks. The enemy is shocked by the scene and can't believe what he's seeing. With an explosion, the sphere shatters and sends the man flying with the force of the impact. From within the smoke, our main character emerges with a new power and a new sword. With that, he unleashes a powerful lightning attack towards his opponent. The enemy is paralyzed with fear upon seeing the young man coming at him with everything. He is in shock and wonders what that absurd power of the boy's is. And before he can react, the boy hits him squarely with his powerful blow. After the fight, our main character looks at the scene with a cold and victorious expression. The enemy's body falls to the ground, lifeless, with its head separated from its body. With the victory, the yellow aura around the young man finally dissipates slowly. Our hero sighs in relief and picks up a sword from one of the fallen bodies. And he thinks that the lightning technique is indeed a killer sword with incredible power. But suddenly, the boy feels something strange and puts his hand to his mouth in pain. He realizes that the technique is powerful but takes a heavy toll on his body. The young man thinks he has lost a lot of time and needs to move before the area changes. But suddenly, the boy feels a strange presence and is on high alert. With that, he turns around quickly because the aura he felt is very terrifying. In his eyes, the reflection of a mysterious figure leaves him completely shocked. The figure reveals itself as a massacre demon, and the young man can't believe it. He then wonders why a killer demon would be in that place. Our main character soon suspects that the location has become a restricted zone. He remembers he didn't go there to run and wonders what will happen now. The boy then observes the demon very carefully to try and understand the situation. The creature stands still, not moving, and seems not to have noticed the young man's presence. Seeing no response, he thinks he should get out of there as quickly as possible. With that, he tries to sneak past behind the demon to escape without being seen. But suddenly, the young man realizes something is wrong, and his plan changes. A giant snake with a glowing red mouth appears in front of him out of nowhere. The boy is in shock at the giant creature that suddenly appeared before him. Suddenly, a surprise attack almost hits him in the blink of an eye, and if the blow had hit him, he certainly would have been done for. At the last second, he manages to dodge the killer demon's fatal blow. Our main character is shocked because he didn't feel the attack being launched. and he understands that without the path of the beast, he would surely be finished by now. With that, the young man faces the enemy, preparing for what's to come. A tear runs down his eye as he faces the enemy with his sword. The demon realizes that if he moves, the boy will attack at the same moment. Then he remembers his master saying that prey is not easy to catch, and the young man says that's because prey moves in a zigzag pattern. The master confirms and says that even so, the best predators manage to hunt, and that's because they combine their attacks with the prey's movements. The boy asks how to deal with that, and the master makes him think about the answer. Back in the present, the young man seems to have a plan and gives a slight smile. With a cry of fury, the young man prepares to put his plan into action. He then runs in a zigzag pattern to make his movements unpredictable. The killer demon just watches him with a calm look and prepares for the attack. First, the boy moves in a predictable zigzag to lure the enemy. Without wasting time, the creature advances with absurd speed to intercept him. And in the blink of an eye, the demon is already in front of the boy, ready to attack. But the young man uses the path of the beast to dodge the blow at the last second. With that, he tries to create an opening with a completely unpredictable movement. But the boy is in shock to realize that his plan didn't work as he expected. The demon then points its huge sword towards the boy with a cold look. Our main character realizes it's too late and that this will be his end. But suddenly, the blow stops inches from his face, and he doesn't understand what's happening. The young man wonders why the enemy stopped and if he crossed into the restricted zone. With that, he realizes that the demon cannot leave the restricted zone where he was. In the end, he understands that he only managed to escape and didn't create any chance to win. He then realizes that the killer demon is a true master of another level. With that, time passes and a new night arrives, bringing more challenges. The young man thinks that the master's skill is on a completely different level. He remembers the beast that took his grandfather's life and its absurd power, and the boy knows that monster also had a terrifying fighting power. With that, he understands that to get revenge, he needs to surpass that level. Suddenly, a voice calls his name, and he turns to see who it is. A guy says he has been looking for him for a long time and heard that he trained in the path of the beast. Our main character finds it strange and suspects that he also shares information. The young man tries to say something but is interrupted by the new opponent. He says he doesn't need to know the name of someone who is about to pass on. Without wasting time, the guy charges into the attack with everything he has. Our main character gives a slight smile and prepares for the fight that is about to begin. He then manages to dodge the blow with great ease and the opponent is shocked. The guy praises him for having predicted the path of his blade with his instincts. He says the boy will surely become one of the 10 candidates with that ability. But he decides he will finish the seed of the demonic sect right there. Our main character notices that the opponent's technique has changed and wonders what it is. He remembers that not everyone there wanted to become one of the 10 successors. With that, the boy suspects that the man might be an infiltrated spy. He knows he needs to set aside distractions and focus completely on the fight. Suddenly, the young man feels something strange in his body and on his sword. He then realizes that his opponent is using a very different technique. With that, a strange suction force begins to pull our hero closer. The reflection in his eyes shows a man being examined by his grandfather. He remembers that the man had been hit by the Oho Danmun blade. His grandfather explained that the mark of that blade was to break all the bones in the body. With a look of hatred, the young man remembers the Peng clan of Hebei and their technique. The opponent is in shock and doesn't understand how the boy knows all of that. He wonders how the boy knows the absorption technique of the Oho Danmun blade. His grandfather explains that this is one of the fundamental skills of internal strength, and by using it in every movement, the technique interferes with the opponent's weapon. With that, the enemy's sword form is broken, and in panic, he ends up being devoured. But his grandfather explains that the technique is a double-edged sword that can also harm the user. Back in the present, our main character thinks about using this absorption technique. With that, he grips his sword firmly, ready for what's to come. Then the young man advances and says he will guide his sword towards the enemy. The opponent then introduces himself as Peng Ak and glares at him with hatred in his eyes. He shouts that in the name of the Peng clan, he will finish the seeds of the demonic sect. Our main character just glares at him from the side, unfazed by the threat. But instead of attacking, the boy thrusts his sword into the ground with all his might. The opponent is shocked by this action and wonders why he stuck his sword in the ground. With that, he uses the sword as a pivot to dodge the enemy's attack. Then the young man manages to land a direct hit on the opponent from behind. With that, the guy falls to the ground, completely defeated and with no chance to retaliate. Our main character stands with his sword in hand after the successful blow. And with a smile on his face, he celebrates because his plan worked perfectly. The opponent gets up furiously and calls him a demonic beast for using dirty tricks. The young man thinks that the trick worked, but the impact wasn't strong enough. But he believes he has finally found a way to counter the technique. He then remembers that one of his masters taught him the late strike technique, and understands that if he reverses the absorption technique, his sword will be much faster. The enemy challenges him again, and our hero decides not to resist the pulling force. With that, he grips his sword firmly and concentrates all his energy. The absorption force pulls him in, and he jumps over the opponent with a swift movement. In the air, the boy positions his sword right above his enemy's head, and at the last second, he changes the direction of the blade for the final attack. With that, the two swords clash with impressive force and speed. The enemy grinds his teeth as he can't withstand the force of the young man's blow. He is then shocked and wonders if the boy is also using the absorption technique. He finds it impossible, as the absorption technique is strong enough to pull rocks. Furious, the guy charges again and says that a boy couldn't possibly use that technique. Our main character just stares at him with a serious and determined look. He then says it's useless and that the stronger the absorption, the faster his sword becomes. With that, the two swords clash in a duel of speed and power that is truly impressive. The two then exchange blows that are faster and more precise in the middle of the forest. The opponent becomes furious and wonders how long that pathetic trick will work, but suddenly our main character stops using the technique and the guy is confused. He realizes that the young man's absorption technique has simply vanished. The enemy gets annoyed and says the boy is strong even without the absorption technique. Then he advances for the final attack with all his strength and accumulated power, but our main character surprises him by blocking the blow with ease. He then says he was waiting for this moment and prepares for the counterattack. With that, the young man unleashes a powerful red aura, preparing to attack. And with a determined look, he unleashes the profound mystic sword technique. With that, he advances with a powerful blow towards his opponent from top to bottom. The energy of the attack creates a red wave that passes through the enemy with great force. Our main character then stands still with a serious and determined look on his face. The opponent looks at him from the side and seems impressed by the young man's skill. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain and realizes his shoulder was injured in the attack. With that, blood starts to gush and he is shocked by the unexpected scene. The pain is so great that he falls to his knees on the ground, unable to bear the wound. The fallen man then confirms that it is indeed the profound mystic sword technique. Our hero admits that the fight was very dangerous and that he took a great risk, because to convert the defensive technique into an attack, he had to withstand all the blows. The enemy can't believe the young man interpreted the technique that way and questions him. But our hero says he has nothing to do with his revenge, and that's why he let him live. The guy smiles and finds it interesting that there are people like him among his enemies. With that, our main character says goodbye and tells them never to meet again. And so the young man continues his journey alone, leaving the opponent behind in the forest. The guy from the Pen clan remains on his knees, completely without strength to continue. Suddenly, he senses a new presence and lifts his bloodied head. With a look of defeat, he asks if the newcomer has come to finish him. A hooded figure appears and says he was useful for an orthodox fighter. The fallen young man asks with a bitter smile if the other knew everything from the beginning. Then the hooded figure reveals that the boy underestimated the power of the demonic sword. With that, the mysterious figure raises his sword and says goodbye to the fallen young man. In the blink of an eye, a swift and silent blow ends the conversation forever. The scene then cuts to the dark forest, showing that the night is still full of dangers. Meanwhile, we see another person walking alone in the darkness, and we find out that it is Seo Jinha, one of the students from the advanced hall. But he seems to be in a very bad situation with his hands completely injured. The guy then falls against a tree, totally defeated and without his sword. And with a look of pure exhaustion, he faces the opponent who defeated him in the fight. Then a mysterious figure says it was his bad luck to have crossed his path that night. Seo Jinha glares at his opponent with a look full of hatred and fury. The group's leader taunts him, saying he was hit by a poison needle. He is furious that there are people who use techniques and poisons in an organized manner. With that, the young man realizes there are limits to fighting alone against a trained group. The leader then mocks him for trying to use the sword with his left hand. She says that even a genius can't switch hands and fight well. Suddenly, with a wicked smile on her face, the woman simply tells the boy to give up. Without wasting time, the group charges with full force at the cornered young man. The leader then attacks with several needles towards her opponent. Even injured, the boy tries to defend himself from the attacks with his sword, but he ends up being hit squarely by one of the poison needles. The young man then realizes that if he doesn't take the antidote soon, it will be his end. Surrounded and with no way out, the boy realizes he has no way to escape the situation. With a bitter smile, he understands that it's all over for him anyway. But suddenly, the boy falls to the ground, and the leader shouts, asking who is there. Suddenly, our main character appears and jumps between two of the female enemies with his sword in hand. With that, the group members are completely shocked by the young man's sudden appearance. And with a vacant and terrifying look, the boy faces the enemies surrounding him. He then grips the hilt of his sword firmly, preparing for combat. And in the blink of an eye, the young man advances and defeats all the enemies with incredible speed. Seo Jinha watches the scene, unable to believe what just happened. After the attack, all the group members end up on the ground, lifeless. Our main character then stands with his bloodied sword in hand. The injured guy looks at the young man with a look of pure astonishment and suspicion. He then tries to explain, saying he doesn't want to harm him, and asks him to wait. But our hero ignores him and grabs the fallen group leader by the collar. With that, he takes the antidote and thinks that now he can deal with the rest of the group. Seeing this, the other guy despairs and asks our main character to wait a moment. Our hero then turns to him and wonders what is happening there. And with that, the young man explains that he was also poisoned and doesn't have much time. But our main character says he misunderstood, as he came to finish everyone, including him. The guy agrees and says that even if he is left alone, the poison will take him anyway. Desperate, the young man makes a proposal and says he will join him in exchange for the antidote. Our main character is a bit surprised by the guy's unexpected proposal, but with a serious look, he simply asks why he should do such a thing. The young man explains that there are only 20 of them left and all the others have already formed groups, and that even though he is strong, he couldn't defeat all the others alone. The guy then swears he will never betray him if our main character saves his life. Our hero analyzes the guy and thinks he is proud but doesn't seem like a traitor. With that, he asks what the terms of the alliance between them would be. The young man proposes that they fight together until only the two of them are left in the end. Our main character then becomes pensive and seems to be considering the proposal. Seeing this, a tear of hope runs down the poisoned guy's eyes. After thinking for a bit, our hero finally takes the antidote for the poison. With that, he throws the antidote to the guy, who is surprised by the gesture. Grateful, the guy takes the antidote with trembling hands full of hope. But before he can drink it, a strange sound echoes, and our hero stops him right away. With his eye glowing red, he realizes that another restricted zone has appeared. Our hero warns that they need to leave, but the other young man thinks the place doesn't seem restricted. The guy explains that with the area sealed, the other survivors will come here. With that, the two hear footsteps and realize that more people are coming to the location. Then several other competitors appear, and they all seem to have already formed their groups. With that, the two are cornered and prepare to fight against all the others. The guy then realizes it's already too late as the other survivors have arrived at the location. Among the new enemies, a guy with a mysterious smile stands out in the crowd. With a confident smile, the man gestures for everyone there to be silent. Our hero analyzes him and feels that this man has a very different aura from the others. One of the candidates gets annoyed with the waiting and suggests finishing the two right there. The gray-haired guy identifies Boyun Sol, master of the Path of the Beast from the Nangya sect, and also Seo Jinha, whose swordsmanship is excellent, and who has also investigated the other candidates. With that, the gray-haired man realizes that the two are not in different groups but have joined forces. The two then face each other with a serious look, ready for the fight to begin. Seo Jinha then takes the antidote he received with his injured hand, and our main character realizes that is the pouch with the powdered antidote he gave him earlier. Then the guy shouts to our hero and spreads the powder to create a chance for them. With that, the purple smoke spreads and the enemies are startled by what is happening, and the gray-haired man recognizes the powder as the poison of the hellish blood sect. With the distraction created, the two start running to escape the enemy's ambush. But one of the men realizes that the smoke is not poison and shouts that they were tricked. Then he shouts that it's not poison and that they were tricked and orders them to get the two. Seo Jinha explains that the powder only creates a dense smoke perfect for a distraction. He says they need to go to the Rocky Mountains with all the caves, and our main character says he thinks the same and that he knows the perfect place for them. He describes a cave with a narrow entrance and a long passage inside. His new ally is shocked that the boy has even mapped out the caves. His new companion runs and wonders who our main character really is. Meanwhile, the large group of enemies continues to pursue the two relentlessly. With that, the two continue running side by side to escape the chase. They then finally arrive at the huge and terrifying stone mountain. Seo Jinhan then shouts excitedly, saying that they have finally arrived at the location. But suddenly, a purple mist appears, and the guy is confused by the scene. Our main character finds the mist strange and realizes that something is not right. And from within the mist, a hooded and terrifying figure suddenly appears. Right after, several other creatures just like it also emerge from the darkness. The guy recognizes the creatures and understands that the place has become a restricted zone. With that, he realizes that the masters marked the location on purpose when they saw them running. The young man despairs, but our hero explains that the demons don't attack if they don't cross the boundary, and says that since they have to fight anyway, it's best to do it right there. Because with the restricted zone at their backs, the fight would be like in a cave with the exit blocked. With that, the guy understands that there is no other choice and prepares for combat. With that, our main character and his new ally stand side by side, ready for the fight. Then the enemies arrive and say that the two's escape has ended right there. The opponents give a confident smile as they think they have already won the fight, but the duo faces all the enemies with a serious and fearless look. And behind the two, the creatures from the restricted zone just watch the scene. One of the group leaders calls them annoying pests and decides not to drag things out. With that, he shouts for all his men to attack with everything they have at once. Without wasting time, the group of enemies charges at the duo with full force.